Hello, this is Jessi Sletten with Empowering Postpartum. Welcome to the Spanglish World Networks on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. And while you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is totally free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. And I'm very excited to be back with another episode of Empowering Postpartum with me, Jessi Sletten, your postpartum prep coach, helping you feel calm, confident, and prepared for your postpartum experience before birth so that you can have the peaceful fourth trimester you deserve. And I want to welcome my very special guest today, Courtney Zentz. Thank you for joining us today, Courtney. You're the founder of Tiny Transitions, and I'm just so excited for you to be here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to have a really great show because I know we're going to be talking about something that we both are very passionate about, and that's really having the skills and tools and understanding on how to navigate those first 12 weeks with your baby, because they can be very overwhelming and they can have a lot of obstacles that can get in our way, especially around sleep, feeding, balancing the responsibilities and things with our partner, all of these kind of things that can add to how we really transition into our parenthood. And so I'm very excited to have this conversation. But before we jump into that, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the work that you do, kind of your journey into working with parents.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey started about 10 years ago. I was in corporate, working my way up the ladder, and was home on maternity leave. And I had a team of 40 at the time. And I thought, wow, I'm going to be on email while baby is latched to breast. And it is going to be a joyous 12 weeks that I'm home here in the States, And it was nothing like that. And it was very eye-opening for me. And I didn't really have a village. My mom had passed away when I was much younger. And so I was kind of alone. My husband went right back to work. And I was like, wow, what I thought parenting was going to be, and then what it was, there wasn't really any preparation for it. It was sort of like, make sure your baby is strapped in at the hospital and then good luck,
Hi.
I was like, whoa, now what do you do with this thing, And so honestly, it was a little bit of a tough adjustment for me. I'm a little bit of a type A person. I like structure and routine, and you don't have that with a newborn. And even in the work I do today, I explain to parents, like, you can prep as much as you want. There is a balance of the fact you're raising a new baby and they have unique needs, but really struggled with being home on maternity leave, honestly. And I had undiagnosed postpartum anxiety and depression. I had intrusive thoughts, which, I didn't really know what that was at the time, but I was like, don't go into the kitchen in case you trip and fall and you're holding the baby, right? And we can talk about that, but it was just all this stuff that sort of built up. And around 8 weeks, I was like, I have to do something about this. And I started researching and trying to figure out, like, how can I make sure they're growing and getting enough milk and sleeping well? And every day can't be just a little bit of chaos that it was. And I started to put into practice the things I was learning, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, life is getting more normal. And it was just eye-opening to me. And I'm like, wow, I really love this and love every part of what I'm learning. And so many other people felt the same as I did. And so I kind of on the side just went back and became like a postpartum doula, certified lactation, also got my sleep certification, and started just working with families a little bit more on like that newborn period. So it's really been a cool journey, because 10 years later, and here we are, like, I've got sleep coaches on my team, and it's been really fun, and we're doing all kinds of good stuff. So it's been awesome for me.
Yeah. And, I think that that's so true and common to so many people that I talk to on the show and just like out in the real world. Like, we get into this work because we have had an experience, and a lot of times it wasn't the best experience. And so we're like, we want to make things better for parents who, come after us. And I think that that's such an important thing because, we can really sit with that and create that space for these parents and understanding and know, like, this is hard, but I am here for you. I have the tools that can help make this a little easier. And so I just love having these conversations, because every single time it's just so reaffirming, like, okay, there's a lot of passionate people who are in this industry, and it's because we can really connect heart to heart with these parents who are going through these things and provide a little bit of light in sometimes this dark period that can happen, and really show them that it can be something that they have the skills that they can use, to get through this easier. So I just love that. Thank you for sharing your journey, because I know that that really impacts a lot of what we do.
Well, I think you already said something that's so meaningful, which is like you come into it with this idea that everything is gonna be like glory and perfect and balanced, and it's not always, right? Like having a baby and learning what you're supposed to do is a bit of a period where I think there's mixed emotions. You
Yeah.
already said like it's supposed to be this joyous, amazing gift, which it
Mhm.
is. And
Yeah.
at the same time, you feel sometimes so dark and alone, and it's like, how are
Yes.
these two worlds colliding, and how can I help parents to feel less over here and more over here? I kind of say
Right.
like lean in and love parenting as much as you love your kids, because I did not for 12 weeks. And I'm
Right.
like, how can I make this better for people, now 10
Yes.
years later in doing this? So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that that is, it's good to normalize because I feel like there is either it's kind of this polarized thing that I feel like we see out, especially in social media. You either see it as like everybody's miserable, we're struggling, there's the mental health aspect, and that is very true. Like there are awful, mental health rates and other very, very hard things that our birth givers are going through right now and that we've experienced. I also was a postpartum depression and anxiety survivor. And so it's very true and it's very real, but it's also true that there's people out there who are like, it's perfect. There's nothing wrong. Everything's beautiful. And it's like, there's really this like reality in the middle where it can be a little bit of both. And then having those tools and resources at your disposal and having those connections and support is really what pulls us through to the other side. And we have more of those light and happiness and joyful moments, among the hard times too, so we don't get stuck in this like we're stuck and we can't get out of it scenario. Or the guilt that goes on the other side of I'm not experiencing this perfect bliss. What's wrong with me? Because that was my story. I'm like, I must be doing something wrong because I'm miserable. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to soothe my baby. I don't know how to feed my baby. I don't know how to do all these things, right? And so it's like for me, I always want a parent to hear that it's a learning process. It is a skill being a parent. Like it's, yeah, we have some intuition that we're born with or that we come into parenthood with, but a lot of times that's something that's built up over time. And I don't know if you have something, to say about that, but that's just kind of how I always liked parents to hear this is that, it is a practice skill, just like anything else.
yeah, and you are navigating the first 12 weeks, because I can
Yes.
teach you all about a baby's stomach size or their intake
Mhm.
needs or proper burping positions and stuff. But it's like when
Right.
it comes down to it, your baby's different. Every baby's unique,
Yes.
right? So
Right.
there's an aspect of it that like you can teach like, hey, foundationally, here's what the American Academy of Pediatrics says, or what,
Yes.
this is traditional for this situation, right? But it's like, well, your baby might be different too. And I think normalizing, to your point, those discussions, because I
Mhm.
felt like I was failing
Yeah.
motherhood, and my husband would come home and I would just be a mess. And I'm like, I'm jealous that you got to leave to go to work. I'm
Mhm.
jealous you didn't have a baby or a pump attached to you all day. I'm jealous that you got to go to the gym. You had 20 minutes in the car to drive, and this
Mhm.
animosity after 8 weeks built up. And finally we were in the car at about 8 weeks when I had this like aha moment of like, okay, like I got to fix this. And you know what he said? And it's the best advice. But at the time I wanted to like stab him with words, while we were driving on the turnpike, which was get a whiteboard, Courtney.
Yeah.
He's like, I
Mm.
don't know what to do to help you. And you're trying to do it all because you think you
Yeah.
have to be this perfect everything. Get a
Yeah.
whiteboard and write what I need to do. And then when I
Mhm.
see that it's on the whiteboard, I'll check it off. And I was like,
Right.
and passive aggressively, like on Amazon, I ordered the biggest whiteboard possible. But at the time I joke, I'm like, that whiteboard,
Yeah.
it didn't like save our marriage. And but I say that
Right.
like it saved our sanity, because I mean, it did save our marriage too. We're very happy. But, in the
Yeah.
moment, I was like, I'm jealous of everything that you still have that I feel like I lost in gaining this new responsibility of motherhood. And I think normalizing that and normalizing intrusive thoughts and postpartum anxiety and stuff, like I think the more people in our position talk about it,
Yeah.
the less isolated and alone someone might be who catches this episode or sees it and goes, oh, okay, it's not just me. Like I thought I was losing my mind when I
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah.
like go out the front door because I was afraid I was going to trip.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. My anxiety was just the same. Like I had times where if I could get myself into the car because I had to get my baby to the appointment, let's say, I would stop like at least 3 or 4 times and pull off to the side of the road, triple check his car seat. It was very like, what is wrong with me? Like, why do I feel like I was a very confident person in myself and my skills? And I felt so out of my depth that I was just like, holy cow. Like, I don't even know how to who to talk to, who to turn to. And I don't want anybody knowing that I can't do this because there's going to be judgment. There's going to be all these things. And these are stories, they're stories that we tell ourselves. And so the more we hear that this is a very common thing that happens, I don't want to normalize postpartum anxiety disorders or depression because that is common, but it is not normal and it is treatable. So that's a message that I really want to make sure people are hearing. But that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means that you need some help and it's okay to need that help. And to know who to go to is really, really important. And that's one of the things that I really encourage parents to do as far as the prep work, because there's some things we can't prepare for. But these kind of things where we know, like, okay, I know who I can reach out to who's covered by my insurance for mental health support, right? Like, these are all things that I encourage people to do because if you don't need them, great. But if you do, it's going to be a hell of a lot easier to get that help that you need because you've already done the work. You've already had that identified, and then that's one less barrier for you to get the support you need. So I don't know. That's just something that I always preach on my soapbox about, but
well, no, it's so important. I mean, I think as a new parent, which started 10 years ago, right?
Mhm.
Things weren't as easily accessible. Social wasn't as big as it is today, but like I craved going every week to this like nursing moms group. And
Yeah.
it would take me an hour to get everything ready, but it like, gave me an hour of something to do. And then we'd get in the car and we would drive to the hospital, which was like 40 minutes away. So inevitably my son would sleep. And then I'd get to go in my like stroller and I'd navigate through the hospital, but it was like, and it was only an hour, but like I met other moms and we were kind of,
Yes.
there commiserating. Right. And then when I had my daughter, I joined an infant massage class just for
Yeah.
something different to do, but just
Mhm.
trying to like get out and connect with people, but in a place that I felt safe going, if that makes sense, with a
Yes.
newborn where you're like, okay, like what are we doing?
Right, right. Oh my gosh, that sense of connection is so, so important. And it's hard because it is an isolating time because you do feel like you need to have this cocooning effect, right? To be able to get your breastfeeding down if you're choosing to do so, get your napping schedules down or figuring out who this little human is, right? Like they're their own person, they're going to have their own cadence in life to start out with and helping them navigate that. It's all very much tempting to stay in and want to do that. And I think that's a good thing at the beginning, but we also need that connection piece too, and finding things that make you feel comfortable about that connection piece and where to go. And that's another thing you can look up ahead of time is those community resources, what groups are available out there, your hospital, what kind of groups do they have, breastfeeding support, any of those kind of things, looking into that ahead of time so that you know that there's something there for when you are feeling like you need and are ready for that connection is so
Yeah,
helpful.
no, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know we wanted to talk about a few things specifically because this is a very broad topic when it comes. There's a lot going on in those first 12 weeks, but I know that with your expertise, sleep and intake needs and balancing all of that with making sure that baby's getting enough that they need and the sleep that they need as well as you. So I'd love to kind of pick your brain on, let's talk about understanding newborn sleep and how we balance that with their intake needs and all of those type of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when parents come home, they really don't know, right? It's a blank slate and you're trying to figure out like, are they hungry? Did they
Yeah.
poop? Do they need a diaper? Like what's going on, right? The first and best advice I wish someone had given me at the time was your baby can only really be awake about 45 to 60 minutes. And
Mm.
so you want to pay attention to that because overtired in kids triggers overstimulation and overstimulation
Yes.
triggers poor eating habits, which means they're not getting what they need. So then they're not
Mhm.
growing. And then you start to get into this hamster wheel that,
Yeah.
over the course of days, weeks, and months can sort of spiral a bit out of control. Right. And something that sometimes you end up needing to play catch up on if you go to your first well visit, they're like, baby lost a little too much weight,
Right.
and you have to manage that. Right. So like
Mhm.
understanding awake windows, and it's a term I see all the time, like wake windows, what's their wake window at birth, right? And just to give you a quick glimpse of the kind of ease of calculating it, it's 45 to 60 minutes, kind of those first 3 months of life. And then around 3 months, it jumps out about 30 minutes to about 90 minutes awake. And then 4 months, it's about 2 hours, right? And then five
Yeah.
months, it's about 2.5. And then at 6 months, you kind of stay around 3 hours for the better period of the rest of the year. And doing so keeps your baby's what's called adenosine, which is a neurotransmitter. It keeps it in check, right? And
Mhm.
when your brain has this, release of adenosine and the level gets a little bit too high, it's ready for a nap. And if you don't take a nap, it thinks you're trying to stay awake. So it's like a bunch of stimulant hormones, right? So you're trying to stay in this like homeostasis of sort of managing overtired with a newborn is probably like the number one thing next to intake, which we can certainly talk about, like how to ensure they're getting the right intake and, whether you're bottle and formula feeding, whether you're pumping and breastfeeding, or whether you're just exclusively breastfeeding, like there's, kind of things next when it comes to intake that are also really important, and kind of first isolating, like what can you control, which is when baby sleeps, and then how much they're getting to eat.
Yeah. No, and I think having those like general outlines can be very helpful versus like I've seen some crazy things out there where people are like by the minute trying to track all these things, and that can really feed into that anxiety piece, right? And that kind of obsessive way of tracking stuff. But if you have this like more generalized idea of, okay, we need to make sure, the 45-minute or whatever mark is really where we need to be shooting for. So at least we can have that kind of more generalized idea that gives you a little bit of freedom, I feel like, for, okay, I can take a breath. I just need to manage this wake window. And if baby is doing their thing and it might be a little off, at least I know I'm managing that most important piece and really kind of isolating it down to that, distilling it down to that most important piece. Because I know when I was so overwhelmed, like I was tracking everything. Like those apps can be great, but they can also really be kind of detrimental to parents' mental health, because it's just like you end up tracking every little tiny thing. You're going to drive yourself crazy, right? And so I love that you're like, let's simplify it and kind of keep it at this wake window as a starting place. So I think that that's really helpful.
Well, and I think to your point, like babies don't consolidate when they're newborns. They're not going to take long naps all the time. Sometimes they will, but when a baby's born, they have two stages of sleep: REM sleep and non-REM sleep. For the first 3 months of life, 50% of their time is spent equally in both. It's the only period of life where that happens, right? And then somewhere between 3 and 4 months, you move to more of a regular circadian rhythm. You move to, the ability then developmentally to consolidate naps, which when naps consolidate, allow you to not take 9 million naps a day, right? And you start to get longevity, you get schedules, and then you can feed around the naps, and you start to see between 3 and 4 months, things really take shape. I talked to a client last night, they're both doctors. And so the mom went back to work at 6 weeks, and the husband went right away back. He was a gastrosurgeon. And we talked last night, and their little guy is only 3.5 months old, is sleeping through the night. Mom was, like still exclusively breastfeeding, but she's like, I'm struggling with a little bit of supply, but otherwise, like, thank you so much, because you prepared us for those first 12 weeks. So now we don't have to like stress, and we don't have to sleep train, because baby just sleeps well. Because from birth, we sort of paid attention to the wake windows and their intake needs, which is like the number 2 thing, right? Is how much milk are they getting?
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's another area where a lot of worry can creep in for parents, right? Like, how do you know how much your baby's getting versus how much they need, especially if you are chest or breastfeeding? That's a really big thing for parents, because you can't actually see the volume like you can in a bottle if you're exclusively pumping or, formula feeding. So I know that that can be a really big source of anxiety for a lot of parents as well. So I don't know if you have any tips around like kind of navigating that, so that you have that peace of mind,
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you, baby, when they're born, their belly is the size of a walnut, just to give you some like actual object. I know when we were born, I'm like, your baby is the size of a banana,
Right.
So when they're born, their belly is the size of a walnut, right? And then up to about 3 months, it quickly after the first week goes from like walnut to egg, right? So then it sticks at egg for a bit. And then around 3 months, it jumps to an orange. So you can see like an egg to an orange is a pretty big jump, right?
Right.
Doesn't matter if it's breast milk or formula, they need 24 to 32 ounces of milk in a 24-hour period for optimal growth. And I wish somebody told me that number,
Yes.
right? Because there are certain things that are variable with babies. You can't control reflux and colic and certain things, right? But you can control like getting them to sleep so they're not overtired, and how much milk they're getting, right? And then if they're not getting the milk because they're in discomfort or pain, it is a very clear way to isolate like, hey, there is probably some reflux going on or something else going on that, the pediatrician can advise on. But the best way that I advise from a registry standpoint, so I know you work with a lot of folks, obviously like prepping for baby's arrival, put a baby scale on your registry. Okay. not to the point in which you're obsessive about every single feed every
Mhm.
single day for the first 12 weeks of life. You will also drive yourself crazy and create a whole different type of anxiety.
Right.
Use it as a baseline because you cannot see what is coming out of your breasts, right? And as a lactation counselor, sometimes I get a little heat from other lactation counselors about this, and about advising people to do that. But it's a numbers game. And as
Mhm.
a parent, I want to feel confident that when my baby's crying, they're not hungry, because that's what happened to me the first night at 2 a.m. I was like, I just fed you for 30 minutes on each side. And my husband was sound asleep. And I walked around. It was night 3 because we spent 2 nights in the hospital. And
Yeah.
I remember walking around our little 1-story, living room, kitchen,
Yeah.
split level house, just sobbing at like
Yeah.
2 a.m. I'm like, what do you want? Like, where's
Right.
and the next morning, my girlfriend came over and grabbed one of the like sample formula things and shoved it in his mouth. She's like, dude, he's hungry.
Yeah.
He's been crying since 2 in the morning. I just fed him. I don't
Right.
know what's going on. She's like, your milk didn't come in yet. And I know like people are like, oh, well, they get what they need from the classroom. So I get it. But like the reality is that for 8 hours, my baby was screaming and I didn't understand that he was hungry. And like there's things like that where it's like, oh, okay, then the next day my milk came in. And it's just
Mhm.
learning curves, and things you can't prep for. But like that scale makes it very clear, like, oh, okay, and if for people that don't know what a weighted transfer is, your doctor can always do them. If you don't have a scale, a lactation counselor can do them. Those breastfeeding support groups can do them. And
Yeah.
basically, you're going to lay baby down and all their stuff. And they're going
Yeah.
to go, oh, they're 6 pounds, 7 ounces. And then you're going to nurse them. And then you're going to lay them down with all the same stuff on, diaper included. And it
Mhm.
might be 6 pounds, 11 ounces. And you go, oh, they just took 4 ounces.
Yeah.
Check. And then
Right.
you know what they're getting. And I encourage parents to kind of, again, not obsessively, but like track
Yeah.
that throughout the day so you can see like, hey, my supply is doing all right. Like I have clients that I work with privately and they're like, no, man, I'm like every 3 hours, we got 2 feedings and we're doing great. And then I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
well, something is off here, and for where we are, their age, and I've done this a long time to know. And I'm like, we need to track what's going on. And they're like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I'm only transferring 1 ounce at 2 o'clock. All my
Mhm.
other feedings are good, but that one is for whatever reason, like a little bit of a lower period. And then we put together
Right.
some things that we can do to help stimulate their milk production at that time. But I think it's numbers, right? Like
Yeah.
with a bottle or pumping and bottle feeding, you can see that they're getting the 24 to 32 ounces. If
Right.
you're just relying on the fact that like every 3 hours you're offering both breasts, if they have a lip or a tongue tie and you don't know, it could be causing gas. It could be poor transfers. And it's all things where you're like, why is baby losing weight? Why are they screaming all the time when I just fed them? And again, it takes away a question, which I think is super helpful
Yeah.
in understanding like what are the variables I can control? And then what are the things that I can't that I need to look further into? Like, hey, could something else be going on?
Yeah. Oh, I love that piece about the control. That's something that I always try to talk with parents about as well, because it's during a time that we don't have a lot of control. And so finding those areas where you can take back some of that control can help tremendously with just feeling more empowered and feeling like you do have a little bit of sway in how things are going, during this time where it seems like total chaos, right? And so like finding those pieces of control, knowing yourself, knowing if this would be a helpful tool or if it wouldn't, but it is a great tool to have on hand. I also had a scale because I knew myself and I was like, I need to understand, like, because it was a big obstacle for me to go to those feeding groups because of my anxiety and my inability to really drive because I was just so hyper vigilant around my child's safety. And so, not being able to really get myself there, having that at home was very helpful for me. And I think like the education piece beforehand is so crucial. And I feel like that's not something that we really dive into after birth. We're all about prepping parents for birth and telling them about pain management for labor and telling them about the different ways we can birth and all these things. And we have all these classes. And then it's just not something that we have normalized for parents to have these huge classes that they need, because it's like this is everything after, right? Like birth is just the beginning. We have everything after, and we have this baby that we have to care for, and we have to care for our own health and healing and nourishment. And I love that having these tips and tricks around these major things can really help parents have that guidepost around what's normal and when do I need to start questioning and maybe pulling in an expert around these kind of things. I think that that's really valuable for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think just like that knowledge is power, right? And so
Yeah.
you can start to isolate like, well, that's weird. Like, okay, they're not
Yeah.
transferring. They seem to be really fussy and their legs are coming up a lot.
Yeah.
I would immediately be like, okay, check for a lip or tongue tie to
Yeah.
make sure they're not having a poor latch, which then is leading to excess gas, which is then leading to discomfort, which is then leading to them not eating a lot, and like everything kind of has this chain reaction that you can kind of solve for when you're paying attention to those little things. So
Right.
again, like that knowledge is power, but not to a place where it's like isolating you to be like, I can't go out because I have to
Yes.
weigh the baby. It's just meant to be a
Right.
baseline where you're like, okay, for $60, I can get a good scale that does and is sensitive enough, to
Right.
manage this. And then that takes like, okay, check. They're napping. Check. They're
Right.
eating, right? Okay, now let's start looking at all of the other things that go into the day and the overnight to make sure we're optimizing sleep, optimizing mental health between the parent or
Yes.
parents. There's a lot of different unique situations out there, and mental health is like exhaustion is the tipping point of all of that.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The sleep deprivation is kind of one of those things that kind of lead the experience of postpartum. Like, how much are you getting sleep, and how productive is that sleep that you are getting? I think shifting our mindset around, okay, you're not going to get these big chunks of time like you did before, right? But how can we optimize the sleep and rest you are getting to be able to, get at least enough where you're functioning, you're healing, you feel like you aren't in such a fog, right? Because that can be one of the hardest things, I think, is just like, you lose this touch of time, you lose touch of control, you lose touch of community, all these things that can happen during those first 12 weeks, and finding ways where you can bring those touch points back so you don't feel like you're completely out of control.
And I think there's two ways parents can do it that they might
Yeah.
not be thinking about, right? And
Yeah.
so the first is for bedtime and overnight. I'm a huge believer from birth, putting kids to bed somewhere between 7 and 8 o'clock at night for a
Yeah.
variety of reasons. One, they're on a hard, flat surface in a nursery or your room if they're going to be in a bassinet, like next to your bed or something, right? But putting them in that space to go to sleep, right? A lot of times parents will say, well, can't I just have them in the living room and they'll sleep in the thing and they pack and play? And I'm like, well, the TV's on and you're eating dinner. And frankly, you need some time to decompress. So I
Right.
encourage parents to like put a final feed, for the end of the day, and then put baby down between 7 and 8 o'clock and like get a shower, spend some time with your
Mhm.
spouse or partner if you have one, and just really decompress. If you're pumping, I encourage parents to pump. And if you're pumping and you have the ability to put it in a bottle, I tell parents, I'm like, look, if you're formula feeding or you're pumping and you have access
Mhm.
to that milk, you go to bed. Go
Yeah.
to bed at 7 o'clock, put your baby
Mhm.
down, take a shower, you go to sleep, and you sleep kind of that first shift, right? My
Mhm.
husband and I did this, and I encourage all my new clients to do it if they are comfortable, which is like you sleep from somewhere between like 8 o'clock and that first wake up, which is usually somewhere around 1 or 2. And let me explain.
Right.
I would have my husband go in at 10 o'clock and wake the baby, right?
Mhm.
So after
Mhm.
3 hours, go in and wake them up, even if they're sleeping, bring them out into the living room, offer either a bottle of breast milk or a bottle of formula, and burp them, beep, beep, and put them back down in the crib or bassinet while
Mhm.
you're still sleeping. Okay, so now what happens is you get a chunk of about 6 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
And then if you're nursing, by that end of the night, you've got to get the milk out of your own breasts, right? So from like 8 to 2, you can sleep.
Mhm.
They go to bed at 10 after they feed, and then they sleep the rest of the night. They get 6 hours, you get 6 hours, and you sort of manage like, okay, you get up at 2 and handle the rest of the night feeds. Then maybe they're up around 2 and 4 and then kind of up for the day at 7. But it sort of sets you both up to your point where you can at least get enough to feel restored. Because I will tell
Yes.
you, chronic sleep deprivation over a period of days is starts to wear on you. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And
Yeah.
you have to be able to fill your cup to care for your child in a rational way.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love that idea because I definitely encourage the shift taking is it could be life-changing. Like, it really can be for your rest, your self-care, all of those things, and your partner, right? And that's another way you can feel a team, right? And you're not feeling so much like everything's on your shoulders, or your spouse is sitting there like, I don't know how to help you. This is a great way to kind of rope each other in and feel like, okay, we've got this. We're tag teaming this, we're a team. But let's say like the shift concept just doesn't work for a family. Do you have any other really great suggestions on how else can we kind of optimize sleep if the bottle isn't available or the baby doesn't want to latch to the bottle or whatever that might look like, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you, newborns generally take one part of sleep that's like 4 or 5 hours. Okay. We want it to happen at night, right? You don't want it to
Mhm.
happen in the middle of the day generally because you're not like I Dream a Genie where you could just pass out, and you're like, sleep when the baby sleeps. I'm like, well, I
Right.
can't just lay down. Like I've never been a napper. So I can't,
Right.
I'm chronically exhausted. Like I can't just lay down at 2 p.m. and take a nap, right? Some
Right.
people might be able to, but look at when that period is happening, right? People talk about days and nights being flipped. It's
Mhm.
not generally because the light's coming into the nursery. It's generally because they slept too much during the day. So
Yeah.
trying to understand like what that loose schedule is going to look like, maximizing it typically around 5 feedings in the day, 7,
Mhm.
10, 1, 4, 7 as a baseline. You always feed a hungry baby, but as a baseline every 3 hours, right? That maximizes the intake in the day across those 5 hours. But you don't want a baby sleeping for 4 hours during the day because it means they skipped a feed somewhere. Guess where
Yeah.
that feed goes? Middle of the night, right? So
Yep.
I'm like, if you can look at your day and go, okay, I'm going to feed every 3 hours, presuming they don't need it earlier. Again, they're newborns, but like
Right.
roughly every 3 hours, as the hospital will advise, 2 to 3 hours, but typically every three. And in between that, like if a baby is taking a nap, wake them to feed
Mm.
and then put them back down. They're probably going to go to
Mhm.
bed shortly after that anyway. 45 to 60 minutes isn't that long, right?
Right.
You want that really long stretch to happen overnight so you can get some
Mhm.
sleep too. And there's generally one period that's like 4 to 5 hours, even as a newborn, where
Yeah.
they will consolidate a bit. And that can be really helpful, especially if you're not choosing to pump or you're planning to exclusively breastfeed. So you don't have the access to the bottle and you're on call, you
Right.
want to try to maximize that, as best you can.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. And I think this is all another, point around having this I like concept and idea and understanding of infant growth and infant stages that they go through and really understanding kind of like, okay, so this is kind of the normal for how an infant develops their sleep patterns, how they develop their feeding patterns. So then that way, at least don't use it to judge against everything's wrong. What am I doing wrong? But more as a guideline around, okay, so if I have this general idea and understanding of how babies develop, I can work around that, right? I can figure that out and figure out how that fits into our lifestyle, our family's needs, and all these things. Again, knowledge is power, right? So I really feel like that's a huge takeaway is like learn as much as you can beforehand, and then have an expert or a mentor or somebody who knows this inside and out who can help you. There's a lot of strength in being able to know like I don't know, I've never done this before, so I'm going to defer this to somebody who does, and this is all they do and this is all they help people with, right? And so having that as a part of your team is so powerful. And I call it the support village, right? If we don't have an instant one that's built in anymore to our culture, because we don't for vast majority of us, we have to go out and curate that village. Like we
Yeah.
have to, and we have to know who are the people who can help me with these type of things. And then we have that support from day one. So it makes it so much easier and we're not down drowning in the trenches, and then trying to find out who can help me, which it's never too late to get the help, but it's always so much nicer if you have that identified, beforehand before you're struggling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even things like food prep or like, I remember a girlfriend called once and was like, "What can I do?" And I'm like, "We're out of toilet paper," and she's like, "Okay." So she came over with like a 24 pack of toilet paper.
Yes.
Like I
Yeah.
just needed four, not like, whatever
Right.
at Costco. So, so I kind of laughed, but she brought over a 24 pack of toilet paper. But when she came over, I was like, "Oh, and you're a human. Can you hold the baby while I take a
Right.
shower?" You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it was like, okay, like now you're here. Or, I oftentimes will talk with parents. I'm like, when somebody asks, because they do want to help you, but they don't know how to help you,
Yes.
come over and food prep or pick up my
Mhm.
groceries or make me some dinner meals that isn't just penne pasta, like a meal
Yes.
train where it's like maybe not every night you're getting meals,
Right.
like twice a week and
Right.
pre-schedule that. Your friends would be happy to
Yes.
drop a meal on your front porch so they don't have to see you. Now, if you felt comfortable about saying, come on in, but you don't have to feel obligated. Just please leave this
Yes.
on the front porch in a cooler. And now you at least know like food is ready for you to be nourished because you need to be nourished and energized for a variety of reasons as a new mom. But like also it's one less thing on your list of like, I got to cook dinner tonight and I'm not ready and the baby's freaking out and I don't know what's going on. So it
Right.
kind of takes one thing off that list of like, again, what can you control? And your
Right.
friends and family, like your neighbors, like there are villages out there you can bring in or hire, or you can just reach out to the community of like your friends
Yes.
and neighbors that, I'm sure would be happy to help in some way as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and doing that thought work around, like, who are those people? What are their strengths? What do I know that they enjoy doing and are good at doing? How do I know, who do I know that can fill these certain roles for me, for my own support and, encouragement and those kind of things. I always tell people there's three people that you want to think about, and there could be multiple people in these buckets, but there's the get shit done people, the people who like are great at coming over and be like, yes, I'll clean your toilets. Yes, I'll bake dinner or whatever, and that's where they thrive and they're really good at that. And then there's the, cheerleaders who are going to be there telling you you're doing a great job. You're the best mom for this baby, all those things, those encouragers. And then there's the ride or dies. And those are the people who are really those soul caretakers, right? Who can help you and see you and validate what you're going through and be that person who you need as that lifeline for those hard nights. And they don't have to be people who maybe physically can be there. You can have those people who maybe you can pick up the phone or do a FaceTime or something like that. But those general three buckets are really, really helpful to have. And you can have some people that are hired in those buckets too, right? So like if you need help with the meal train or whatever, there's some people who can do that for you, or house cleaning. That's a big one. Like for me and my husband, that was one of the biggest things that we were so happy we did, was having somebody come and clean our house, right? Like we didn't have to worry about that. He could, not have to have all that on his plate either, because it's like you both are going through this together. It's, you're both experiencing different versions of postpartum, but you're both experiencing it, right? And you're both learning to be parents. So as much as you can to have that support, it just makes a world of difference.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I think asking for it, like I was afraid to ask for help because
Yes.
I didn't know. And then I got so into it that I was ill prepared, honestly.
Yeah.
And so finally when like she called and was like, what can I do? I'm like, I need toilet paper. And it was finally that moment where I'm like, oh, she just showed up with toilet paper 20 minutes later. Like,
Right.
can you hold the baby while I take a shower? Is that
Right. Yeah.
like, I know you didn't like plan to do that, and like people are willing to help, and I think sometimes we're embarrassed to ask for it because to your point, like,
Mhm.
is it a sign of weakness or whatever, and I think sometimes parents do still want to try to do it all and that's hard. It's hard on you as a new parent, because you don't know what birth is going to be, right? My first son was delivered
Mhm.
vaginally. My second daughter they went in to pop her water 10 days late and they're like, she's breached. Who the heck's been doing this? And
Right.
it was like, oh, you're going to have a C-section because her blood pressure's dropping. I'm like, wait, what? No, like I'm
Right.
trying to like, you stick the epidural in and then I push 5 times,
Right.
probably poop on the table, which still nobody will admit that I did. And then
Right.
the baby comes out, right?
Yep.
And instead it was just like, wait, what? I'm having surgery and what the hell's
Right.
happening? And it was just
Yes.
two very different birth experiences
Yeah.
for me that I was like ill prepared for both because the first was my first and then the second was a C-section that I wasn't planning. And you
Right.
can't lift a baby. Like, well, then who's supposed to lift him in and out of the crib at 3 PM? So it's just
Right.
like
Yeah.
all of those things you need to kind of plan and prep for, but not, but just know that there's options, right? And like seeking, to your point, making those lists of like, okay, here's who can help, here's who's available. And I wish I did use my network more
Yeah.
postpartum, but I didn't, for a variety of reasons that I would like to go back and change, but I didn't.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, it's important for us to just like understand that it is not a weakness to ask for help. And there are ways, if you do feel uncomfortable asking for help, that you can still get that help and, have people be those advocates. Like if your partner, they might not have any qualms about asking for help about something. So maybe that can be something they can take the lead on. Or I give, clients, I have this great like printout that they can print out and like get laminated or whatever. And it's literally like, what can I do while I visit? And it's little check boxes. So if you feel uncomfortable verbally speaking to somebody about that, you can let them know, hey, I do have a list. And then they can go over and then just look, right? And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I could help with vacuuming today, or I could help with that. So that's another way that you can just communicate. I think the communication piece is really like the biggest piece, and knowing how to ask for the help that you need and still feel like you can do that. You have that ability to do it and not feel shame or guilt around it, because really honestly, we cannot do this alone. Like we're not made to do it alone, and we can, but it's with sacrifice. And so the less sacrifice you can make on yourself and on your family and on being present with your baby, the better, right? Like it's so important that we kind of safeguard that experience as much as possible.
No, absolutely. And it kind of doves into like the safe sleep side of things, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm a huge safe sleep proponent and
Yeah.
back is best, right? Like, and, I talk a lot with families, like, how do I set up the nursery? How do I dress my baby? How do I know they're too hot or not hot enough or blah, 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 like all these questions that come up. And, it's like, okay, like in the sleep environment, like where do you want to sleep, right? The Vegas Strip
Yeah.
or a calm, cool,
Right.
dark place, right? So
Yes.
I tell parents, I'm like, make the nursery a place that's inviting and, have the mattress with a breathable and comfortable sheet,
Yeah.
right? And have a noise machine at a proper level and room darkening
Mhm.
shades or curtains if that's possible. And,
Right.
all of those little things when you're setting up the sleep environment. And then also like, how does your baby want to sleep? Like people ask me all the time, like, how do I swaddle my baby? Should I be swaddling? What type of swaddle? Arms up, arms down, arms here, arms there. I'm like, go back and look at your ultrasound. What is your baby doing at 20 weeks? Because if they spend
Yes.
40 weeks in your belly like this, they don't
Yep.
need their arms swaddled down. That's not how they're comfortable. So I always encourage people, I'm like, go back and look at your ultrasound and see like were their hands at heart center, were their arms
Mhm.
down, were they up? Because that's one big step in like your baby will sleep when they're comfortable, when
Yeah.
they are fed, when they are clean,
Mhm.
and when they are ready, which is a newborn is quite a lot. So it's
Right.
like little tools and tricks like that to start to build that sleep hygiene. And, I encourage
Mhm.
parents, I'm like, just one time a day, put that baby in the crib or bassinet, ready
Yeah.
to go to bed,
Mhm.
clean, full, just chilling, even a little
Yeah.
drowsy. I get careful with drowsy but awake because it can
Yeah.
sometimes lead to having to sleep train, but like
Right.
just put them down and go pee for a second. You know what
Right.
I mean? And like you come back,
Yes.
they're sleeping. It's like, oh, you just sleep trained your newborn. Why? Because they settled independently in that bassinet. And
Right.
you build on that. Like I don't stress parents out with it. I'm like, one nap a day. Ideally, the first nap is the easiest to get
Yeah.
them to settle, but it's like there's less variables as the day goes, or there's more variables as the day goes on. So it's like first nap of
Right.
the day, put them in that space and just give them a second, right? And
Yeah.
you'll be amazed at like after a couple of days of doing that, like they fall asleep and then they know how to sleep, and then then it turns to two naps and then three naps, and
Yeah.
all the other times, like wear them. Hold
Right.
them, cuddle them, drive them, rock them, do all those amazing skin to skin. And I used to crave my walks, type A. Every
Mhm.
day at 11:45, we'd walk for an hour and
Yeah.
a half because I knew at 11:45 I could walk for an hour and a half, I could get some exercise, and he would sleep, right?
Right.
But it was also a longer nap for them. So they
Yeah.
got good consolidated sleep. It happened at 11:45. We would come back at 1 and feed, and,
Yeah.
like, I just tried to control what I could control with, like, supporting sleep, You don't have to have a baby that you lay down in the crib independently every day for 12 weeks, like, no. You shouldn't be
Right.
doing cuddle, enjoy love, like, get all up in there,
Right.
1 nap a day. That's how
Yeah.
I always encourage parents to even just start with, like, building sleep hygiene and kinda navigating those first 12 weeks of the newborn sleep side of things.
I love that. It's that simplicity approach, like try to just take pressure off yourself and off your baby and just like give things a try. Like just try like one nap a day, like you said. And I loved your idea about checking back on the ultrasound because that like just reminds me of my own son. Like looking back, he was always like this, he always loved his hands up over by his face. And so he hated being swaddled. So I'm now like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
He spent 9 months like this, so why would he want his hands like, all like scrunched and everything? So that's a really great tip. I love that.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's like the little things like that. Like people comment, I'm like, if you can leave today with like one piece of
Yeah,
advice, it's like just take something from this and go, okay, like that's going to be my goal this week. You know what I mean? And I think that the analysis paralysis can kind of
yes.
hurt so many because you don't know what you're doing. And I think the space of sleep is an interesting one because it's not clinical, right?
Yeah.
What we teach is not clinical. So there's no advice when like here in the States, like the pediatricians get 30 minutes of sleep education in med school. You know what I mean? Like it's not, and it's not clinical what we're doing. It's just nobody's teaching this like baby to 12 weeks part. They kind of look at it at 12 weeks and go, ooh, all right, well, we got to fix this.
Right.
But nobody's looking at that first period or the fourth trimester as things you can kind of isolate and control. And I think if there was more vocal kind of conversations about it, and it is hard because like the space I'm in, like lactation is regulated, right? You are a CLC or you're an IBCLC. Being a
Yep.
doula is regulated. There's DONA, which is what I went through from a
Mhm.
certification standpoint. And
Yep.
then there's a couple others, but there's like some main kind of organizations from like a DONA or a doula perspective, excuse me, with
Yep.
sleep. There is no governing body to regulate it, which is a little bit crazy. And people don't understand that. And it's kind of one of those things where after 10 years in the space, it is becoming a lower barrier to entry for people.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard as a practitioner who's done this for so long. Now it's like for $200 and 2 hours, you could be a certified baby sleep coach. And it's like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like there's nobody regulating this. And
Right.
and I think that is knowledge too for parents to be like, understand who you're working with, what their experience is, what
Yes.
they have done, because you just don't know who you're hiring off of like Instagram or TikTok or Google and
Right.
how long they've been doing it and how much experience they have. Cause I can tell you 10 years and a lot of babies later, every
Right.
baby's a little bit different, but the experience is honestly what helps you to understand how to help families, not necessarily what you learn from a book or a training or a certification. There's nothing wrong with that. There's just a lot more of them these days. And
Yeah.
it's really hard to like go, oh, is this a good one or not a good one? And everybody now is kind of jumping into the space. So it makes it hard to, as a parent, to isolate, like who knows what they're talking about and who just graduated like yesterday. And the day before that, they were tie-dyeing t-shirts in a
Right.
fashion. Or, you know what I mean? Like whatever the random thing is they were doing, it doesn't matter. But
Right.
like you just have to understand like who are you dealing with and like how much do they know and just to best support you and your journey,
Right.
equally.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, social media is wonderful because we have a lot of things available to us and, supports and resources, but it's also really important to understand as a parent, like, who are these people that you are following? Because it can be, unfortunately, there are some predatory things that can happen, and these parents we're so vulnerable, right? And we want, especially if we're struggling with something like sleep or, anything else that could be happening with our babies or ourselves in that first, window where we don't, and we're new first time parents, we don't know what to expect, what's normal, what's not. It's so important that we are getting the right advice where, those people's hearts are in the right place and their knowledge is actually backed up by their experience and, their training and all these other things. It's so important to know who you're following and why you should be listening to their advice. Because there is a lot out there that it's just honestly junk. If I'm being completely honest, it's scary. Some of the things that I see out there, I'm like, no, let's not do that. Let's not follow that advice.
And I would say like find one person that you connect with and
Yes.
kind of stick to them. Because if you ping pong,
Yes.
right, like you can Google anything
Oh yeah.
and get an answer from somebody or follow it
Mhm.
on Insta and get an answer there. And like I even still have private clients that are like, well, what do you think about this? I'm like,
Right.
stop. Like I know that you're struggling right now with a little bit of the control and the anxiety, but like you're
Yes.
making yourself crazy and that is not right. And here's why. And then I have to spend 10
Right.
minutes explaining that whatever picture they found on Pinterest doesn't make sense. And here's why. And I think
Right.
you can get into this. It's so easy to access the information that then you almost are doing yourself a disservice, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think we find that in any time of parenting, there's so many like parenting coaches out there now and all these experts on how to help with behaviors and how to help with all these things. And it's like, it's very easy to go all over the place, like, oh, well, that didn't work. So I'm going to try this person, what they say. And then pretty soon, like, that also really kind of wears down your ability to trust yourself as the parent too. It's like, oh, well, this doesn't feel right, but so and so who's an expert tells me that I should be doing this, but it doesn't feel really right, but I'm going to do it because they have 10,000 followers on Instagram or whatever, and then it's like, oh gosh, then you kind of get into this cycle where you're like jumping ship all the time and then doubting your own, parenting intuition and what is right for your baby.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Oh my gosh, we could go on for hours and hours about all of this because it's just something I think we're both equally passionate about. And you've had so many like aha moments for myself, even though I'm out of this newborn stage, that I know this is going to be so helpful for so many parents watching. But we do have a few more minutes, and I'd love for you really quickly to share like any last tips or tricks or like, parting wisdom that you would want a parent watching this episode to walk away with.
I mean, honestly, giving yourself grace first and foremost, because I did not do enough of that when I had a baby. But just again, look at what in your situation, because everybody's situation is unique, like what can you control? And then of the things that you can't, right? Trying to isolate where they might be stemming from, right? Like if you're noticing baby seems uncomfortable or their legs are scrunching or their belly seems like, okay, something's amiss here.
Yeah.
Is it something in the poop? Like start analyzing like, hey, what's going on there? Things like
Right.
that. So it's just try to, again, control what you can and try to ask for help
Yes.
when you can, and just understand again who you're kind of chatting with.
Absolutely. I love that. I think that's super powerful. And speaking of, finding people who can help, I'd love for you to just share like how can people connect with you if they are looking for some sleep support?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a huge proponent of free information to start, right?
Yes.
I don't want you to ever buy anything from me until you start with all the great free stuff, because parenting is
Yes.
expensive. So they can find me on tinytransitions.com. On Instagram, I'm out at Tiny Transitions. I have a pretty decent organic following, but to be honest, I don't love social media because I'm a private person. So I try to
Yes.
balance that. But we
Yes.
do have Sleep Steps, which is also, in addition to our private coaching, our new sleep training membership program. And it's kind of a new
Nice.
concept to people. It's $47 a month and you can come and
Nice.
cancel at any time. It's really meant to be the village because a lot of people don't have it or they can't afford private coaching. And it is all of the information you need for both a newborn, an infant, and a toddler. And it kind of follows you. But there's live coaching with me every week, multiple times, and a
That's wonderful.
community. So when you have questions about things, you can ask it. And I, myself and my team of 8 are in there doing all kinds of great stuff. So,
That's amazing. I love that. That village piece is so important, and having that camaraderie with other parents too is just invaluable.
and
So,
just trying to make it accessible, right? I think
yes,
that's been my biggest mission.
accessibility.
It's like you can buy the
Yes,
course, but there's no coaching. And that's what I wanted to build, was the part that, yes, there's an aspect that's course, but then there's that aspect of that live coaching and the
right.
connection with people. And it's been really cool. We just launched it this summer. It's for Android and iOS, and you can find more on tinytransitions.com about sleep steps as well.
Awesome. Oh, I love that so much. Well, this has been so enlightening. Thank you so much, Courtney. I've loved our conversation. I know viewers are going to take a lot from it. So I really appreciate you coming on. And I just want to remind everybody too that if you follow me over on Instagram, empowering_postpartum, on my link in the bio, I do have a prep guide or a prep course that walks you step by step how you can actually start preparing for this kind of stuff, what you do have a little bit of control over before baby gets here. And it really is a wonderful resource for you to really isolate some of these things that you can prep yourself for ahead of time. So if you're interested in that, head over to the link in my bio. For all my viewers, I give you a 50% off coupon if you use EPTV. So you can get this course that's probably worth at least 900 and something dollars. It's for $47. So it's very, very affordable. I want that accessibility there for you as well. So head over there if you're interested. And remember, this show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. And we will see you all next time. Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.